We're going to talk about our favorite offensive player. It's National Signing Day. Grade the commits, grade the positions. Did we get better or worse this year on Wisconsin? Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. It is National Signing Day. We are recording this day early. I just want to preface this. So if something crazy happens on NSD, like if blame me. If somebody doesn't sign, we're doing it the day before. But this is one of our most enjoyable times of the year. It's National Signing Day. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. $5 bet gets you $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. He is Justin. I am Ryan. This is Locked On Podcast Network. Justin, we're starting here. We're doing offense first. This show is going to be all the offensive recruits. Who's your favorite offensive recruit in this class?
Well, I'm going to go ahead and say that it was one of the last guys to come in, Carter Smith. He fits. If I was to choose what I'm looking for in terms of a quarterback, in terms of skill set, he fits that. He's got an above average arm. He's got well above average mobility. He's super gritty as a player. And that's exactly what I want at that position. I want that guy to be hard-nosed. I want him to be tough. I want him to be somebody who's not afraid to get in the face of anyone else that's out on that field. And I want him to be the guy who, if he needs to kill himself to get in the end zone to win you a game, that he's a guy that's willing to go out there and do that. And that's the type of leadership that you need at that position. And I think that that is exactly the type of player that he is. I love the mobility on him. He's a guy who moves really well. And we've talked about this a few times and some of the things I've said. When you have mobility like this, you can create angles. It's a lot like I said with basketball. When you understand angles as a point guard, that's how you become an elite passer. Well, in college, it's the same thing when you're talking about it with football. If you can take that couple of steps to the right or left to make the angle a little easier for yourself, suddenly throws that are supposed to be, potentially dangerous aren't so dangerous. And that's something that he's capable of doing. A pocket passer is not going to be able to do that as much. And that's why I love having a guy that has some mobility. And he's a guy, if you need a yard or two to get a first down, we'll go get it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And we put the film up here. We're going to put the film up on a lot of these recruits. A lot of what Justin said, I agree with, so I don't need to repeat it. I will say there's an element of a multi-sport guy that I really like. He's a former baseball guy. That means, I think there's more upside with those players because they haven't exclusively focused on football. Like when they get into just a football-only thing, I think they have more growth. I love the toughness. You see him lead blocking, Justin, toss the sweep and go deck a guy. Players are going to follow that. And your quarterback has to be a friggin' leader, period. Your quarterback has to be a guy that's respected. This is a guy that I think is going to do that. I like his ability to throw on the run on either side, step up in the pocket, find somebody. He is going to take a year, right? He's going to take a year in the program because he does have a few mechanical things. He's a little happy-footed in the pocket, I think. And the release is a little off. He looks like a baseball player a little bit.
I don't know if that's necessarily a problem. The only reason I would say that, he's got a quick release. You look at it, I know people think it's elongated by looking at it. He snaps that off. It is like watching a shortstop, though. It's like watching somebody pick and throw. And when you see it, it's because he's not getting that long, lanky, over-the-top delivery that some guys get. He snaps it off like he's throwing from short to first, and he's just trying to get it there. It's not going to look aesthetically as pleasing as it's going to look for somebody who's been exclusively taught how to be a quarterback their whole life. I also think anyone who's played a lot of baseball like that, there's a level of creativity in your ability to just get it done that you learn playing like that helps him throw off platform and helps him with footwork and understanding what you need to do to be accurate because of the way you line your feet up and throw. It's something it's really present in baseball because if your feet aren't lined up, the ball will sail right or left. And it's a lot tougher to deal with it because the ball will tail. You don't have as much of that in football. And with what he's doing here, he has a really good knack, and his body is really live. And what I mean by that is he's got good flexibility, and you watch the way he moves when he's playing stuff. You can see the athleticism on him.
Yeah.
You can't see that in all quarterbacks when they start to move their body and throw, like, jumping in the air and kind of throwing off platform. He's got some of that not everybody has.
Yeah, I agree. You know what he feels like, man? He feels like the type of quarterback that we've gone up against. I say we, like we've been on the
Backyard football.
side, but it feels like the type of quarterback Badgers football has gone up against at times.
Yep.
That has just driven you nuts because he's like a gritty playmaker. He's going to get 3rd and 1. He's going to extend the play. He's going to find something. And he's always the guy that you're like, I wish the Badgers had that when we've had this bevy of pocket quarterbacks.
We talked about him a little bit. He's like Trace McSorley with better tools.
Yeah. I like that comp.
Because he's a guy who's really mobile. He's a guy who's got that kind of, I'm gonna win that. Like, I don't want to call him arrogant because I don't think that's the word for him. But I do think he's a guy who is very confident, and you can see it by the way he plays.
Yeah,
because he's willing to go the extra yard with what he's doing and risk it, rather than pulling up and running out of bounds.
And we're spending a little more time on this one because this is one of the most important prospects in this class. But let's continue on the quarterback class here because Landon Locke is coming in as well. Like tough break for Landon, right? Injures his knee, coming in as a second quarterback. A lot of people were curious why he'd be coming in this class. I just think it's a timing thing, right? Yeah. Where else is he going to go? Quite honestly, after hurting your knee, not having a ton of film out there, like taller, like. I don't know. What are your thoughts on Landon Locke here?
It's a tough one because we don't have a lot to evaluate him with. There were some things that you could like on the film that we saw from his junior year. You would have liked to have seen him be the full-time starter in that situation. The ACL obviously is problematic. He's another guy who's a baseball player. The way I look at it is if you're Wisconsin, you need bodies in the room. He's a guy who has a live arm, and he makes pretty good decisions. He's a solid player in terms of like understanding the game and being able to make plays. There's some similarities there to his brother, but he's got his tools play up because he's taller, and I think he's got a little more arm. You would like to see a little bit more athleticism, but I think that he's capable of being a guy who can sling it around and make plays and understand it. It's really going to come down to my outlook on him is kind of what are we looking at in terms of the offense moving forward? If it's a very like dual threat oriented scheme, I think it's going to be a problem for him because there's just not that part of his game. And there wasn't with Braden either. Like we talked about it all the time in the option game. He doesn't want to keep the ball. And part of that was probably him being told to, but he's also not a natural runner. And we saw that every time he took off and would dive, like anytime somebody got in the area going.
I think the thing with Landon is he has a lot of what ideally you like about Braden Locke. To your point, the understanding where he wants to go, understanding quarterbacking. He comes from a good high school whose coach develops quarterbacks pretty well. And he's bigger. He's got a little bit more of an arm than Braden. Right. So some of the stuff that Braden struggles with, finding those throwing lanes is going to be easier for Landon at the next level just because he's a little taller. He can see over guys a little easier. But to your point, he just doesn't have the athleticism that you're really looking for at this level. Now, if you're the Badgers, I think you take all the quarterbacks you can get, right? Yeah. Like you let them rehab for a year. Maybe there's something there. It doesn't hurt you. This team, you got to get more lottery tickets at quarterback. And you and I have talked about this a lot. You never really know with quarterbacks sometimes. So you might as well take him and see what happens. But yeah, he's very clearly a step athletically below Carter Smith. It just is what it is. How would you grade this quarterback class if you had to put a grade on it?
Well, I mean, it's an A to me just for the fact it's got Carter in it. Like, I think he's pretty close to Wisconsin's ceiling in terms of exactly what you'd want. We're never going to get a top 3, top 5 quarterback probably unless whoever comes in as an offensive coordinator becomes a guru that is just getting guys drafted left and right. So with bar that, he's about as good as it gets. I love the fact that he's got the ability to run and be on the move, and I love how gritty he is. That gives you the option. Like I said, he's a guy, he's ideal for what Luke Fickell wants. It's going to take him a little time probably to get ready to go at the college level, which is fine. But I think that's the type of guys you're going to be looking going forward, that type of skill set.
Yeah, I agree with you on an A. Like if you get a blue chip 4-star quarterback composite 4-star, he's a 92 or 93 overall in the composite, I believe. If 93. You get that at 93, if you get that at Wisconsin, I mean, that's an A class period. Yeah. And now you're also bringing in Landon Locke, who's just another arm that maybe you can develop.
Developmental piece, yeah.
Yeah, that's an A, 100% an A. I want to ask you this. I'm curious on this. Him or Mabry coming out of high school for you? Carter Smith or Mabry?
I like Carter Smith better. I know. You and I talked about it a little bit. You said you were on Mabry and raw tools. I can understand. I like the mobility that Carter gives you a little bit more. Mabry is a mobile quarterback. Don't get me wrong on that, but Carter Smith is more of a runner. Like, he's a more natural runner. He's a guy who's just more comfortable taking off and is a little more elusive than what Mabry is.
I agree with that. He is more elusive. Mabry is more straight line speed.
Yeah.
Kind of what
he's a horse. He's a thoroughbred, getting out there and running around the edge. And he's a big kid, so he can absorb some contact. And Carter's not going to be the guy that's going to go out there and just get constantly beat, banged up by linebackers. Mabry can take a few shots.
He can. Yeah, he's a big dude. But ideally, to your point, and to the point we've been making all the time, you just keep stacking these guys. You get Mabry, then you get Carter Smith, and next year you bring in somebody else, and you just got to keep stacking talent at this spot. Coming up, more recruiting talk, but first, a quick second for our friends of the show over at Better Together. Better Together is the first cooperative daily fantasy application. Better Together offers a familiar experience for existing DFS players. If you played it before, it's not going to be surprised, but with a social twist. Now you get to do it with a teammate, a friend, a buddy, a family member, whatever it is. Put your group to the test, build that camaraderie, build community through sports. Better Together is the first cooperative daily fantasy platform where teamwork triumphs talent, and you get to play with your friends, not against them. Pick more or less on real-time player stats, strategize with your partner to boost your odds, climb the leaderboard together. So grab a friend and join the DFS social movement over at Better Together. Download Better Together now from the App Store and sign up using code Locked On, promo code Locked On, for a chance to win your share of over $1,000 in cash prizes. Remember the code Locked On, because winning alone is fun, but it is better together. All right, let's jump back into recruiting talk. All right, let's go to the tight end spot because we didn't get a running back this year. I want to ask you later if you think that was a mistake. Let's go tight ends. Let's start with Nyzie Davis. What are your thoughts on Nyzie Davis coming into this class? And hopefully he'll sign. Again, that's one that we're a little curious about. But if he does land in Madison.
I absolutely love him. I think that he's a guy who is he's a bit more of a boom bust player because I just don't think that he's fully untapped all of his potential yet. I know that's not saying much given the fact that he's going to be a redshirt or he's going to be a freshman, but the athletic tools that are there when you watch his film, even as a junior, it's so apparent that he has high level tight end ability in him. Just watching how strong he is to the ball when he goes up, like guys are trying to grab at his arms and he's sitting there catching it with both hands. And just, you can tell he's got really strong hands. He's fast, he's physical, and he's a guy who moves really well. And that's something like we've got some guys that are coming in and Stack and a couple of the other guys that are coming in that are good athletes. This is a little bit more of a receiver threat type guy. Some of the guys that Iowa used to get, Noah Fant type guy, a little bit of that where he's almost like borderline wide receiver type. He's got some of that ability where he's such a big dude that he can just get into people and he can really run.
You know what else I like about him, though, is he'll also pop somebody. He will really
absolutely. He's going to be a willing blocker.
Yeah, he will bury some people. So now you're getting a tight end who can run. He's got a little Lance Kendricks, if you want to go back to a Badger guy, Lance Kendricks wasn't like a mauler at tight end, but he would level some people if he would catch them wrong. But he could really get out and threaten the flanks. He could get out and threaten the seam, really good ball skills. Nyzie's got a big catch radius too. He's like 6'5", I think, right? 6'5". Yeah, he's about 6'5", big wingspan, and you can see it. The jump ball radius is there. This is the type of athlete this team needs desperately. And especially that position room, like Grant Steck would pair really well with Nyzie Davis. Yep. The two of them together would
can be more the inline, and then you have Nyzie who can get out there and make some plays in the slot if you want to use him out there.
Yep. Let's shift to the other one, Emmett Bork, who I think is pretty interesting. What were your thoughts on Emmett Bork watching him?
You know, he's an interesting guy. I like getting another body in this class. He's a little bit closer to what you're looking at with Steck. And getting a player that's like that consistently, you're never going to be upset with. He has some versatility that you don't necessarily, we don't have a ton of guys that have that all-around tight end set. We're kind of getting balanced in that regard. Like Davis is more of a receiver. You have McGowan that's a little bit more of a receiver. And then you have Stack Ashcraft, and obviously Bork that are all going to be guys that are kind of can do a little bit of both. The question with him will be, how much of a receiver can he be? He's very physical, but, can he be a guy that is capable of going one-on-one with a linebacker and getting open consistently?
Yeah, he's got just sounds like a tight end. Bork down the seam. Sounds like a tight end. It's funny. His film is mostly, and we got it up here. You can see it. A lot of it is spread out wide. A lot of it is he's just going to go run. His route tree is basically the 9 route. Run straight down the field and jump over somebody and catch it. So I think he's got some developmental stuff to do. Obviously, the level competition. He's not going to be able to do that at the college level, but he's got really good hands, really good hands for a big guy. Enough speed to the point where I think a linebacker might have some issues running with him at times. I like it. It's a developmental piece to go along with what I think is the higher ceiling piece in Izzy Davis. To your point,
do you think he's going to be used as more inline at the college level? I just don't think the skill set plays in the slot. He's not a guy I want busted out on a safety, because I think he's going to struggle to separate.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's an inline guy. I think he's an inline guy that in 2 years, his timeline to me is a couple years down the road. He's developed enough, and he's kind of an inline guy who can threaten that middle of the field, right? Yeah. Who can block, threaten the middle of the field, and then you pair him with a more explosive guy like Izzy Davis.
Yep.
How would you grade this tight end class, assuming these guys sign?
I would give them because I don't think anyone in this class is an outright guy that I look at and say he can't miss. I would probably give him a B+. I think there's a lot of upside in the class. I don't think there's anyone that you look at that has gotten to the point where you look at and be like, this is a guy that could potentially threaten year one. These are guys that are going to take some time to percolate for a little bit. It's going to take them probably a year. They're going to need the redshirt year to kind of get rolling and get going. And then you're hoping that as a redshirt freshman, maybe you can steal a couple reps out there where you can be used maybe in goal line sets or stuff like that, or get an opportunity to go out there and make some plays.
I'm going to go B. I think it's right in that range, right where you're at. I think Bork is just kind of a solid guy. I really like him, but I think he's just kind of a solid guy. And Izzy's got a little bit of boom bust to me that I'm just. Yep. There were safer tight ends, I think, in the class, but they're both.
I'd agree with that, but less ceiling.
Really good class to me. Yeah, I think it's a good class. It's a B. All right, let's go receivers. Eugene Hilton Jr., Justin. The only receiver the Badgers are going to sign this year, 3-star composite, high 3-star composite. I should also point out Izzy Davis, him and Bork, both 3-star composites as well. Where are you at on Eugene Hilton Jr.?
He's a borderline 4-star guy, and I would agree with that. I mean, really the only thing that you'd like to see that isn't quite there is he doesn't have top end speed, but he's got a lot of other things to like. He's a really good route runner. He's a guy who's physical. He's a guy who has really good hands. I actually anticipate him being a guy who can play early. I wouldn't be shocked to see him get reps next year. I just think he's that polished. And if he gets the playbook down, he's a guy that I think they can count on.
Yeah, I like the lineage. Obviously, that it's there, but I think there's just certain things you get if your dad is Ty Elton.
You've been doing it since you were in junior high.
You kind of just
high level stuff.
Some of the nuances, a great hand, really good body control. You can see the body control on deep passes, 9 routes, stuff like that. He's really able to contort his body, make difficult catches. I like that part of his game. One of the things this team has been missing for a while, and Bryson Green gave it to you a little bit. We were hoping CJ Williams would give it to you more, is kind of that X receiver who is going to take on the press coverage. I think he can do more of this to free up some of the slot guys. I agree with you. This feels like a receiver you're going to get, and maybe there's not as much development left, but I think he's probably pretty close to his floor, and he's going to play pretty early.
Who would you comp him to with the Badgers? I think there's one guy that really sticks out to me.
I think the first time I saw him, I thought Nick Toon, maybe that type of guy.
That's exactly the name that pops into my head. Similar body type, similar just the way they run and move on the field. They're guys that kind of have that big body gait, that kind of, just like that long stride. Mm-hmm. And you look at it and you're like, okay, he's a guy. I could see it. I think that the floor is pretty high with him. You're going to get quality play out of him. The question will be how much ceiling is there.
Do you think? And by the way, it's funny when you ask for a comp on Badger receivers, we just don't have a lot of great ones that have his skill set. So
he was an NFL guy. I mean, if we can get there.
Toon was super solid, right? Absolutely. My point is, though, it's just not a deep Rolodex to cycle through, unfortunately.
But they're similar, though. Regardless of which, I think that when you watch the film, like you can kind of see it when you look at it, and you don't always have that great comp. I think it's pretty obvious with him. Like they just move similarly.
What do you think they should have taken another receiver?
Absolutely. I think they needed another outside guy. I kind of look at it and like we kept stockpiling slot guys, and I don't know why we weren't as concerned when you play two guys on the outside. Like, why are you not trying to get some bigger bodies in here, especially when it's an area that you're kind of struggling? We really don't have many 6 foot plus guys. I feel like that's an area where you probably want to diversify the group a little bit more. Like get that 6'4" guy that maybe is a 4'6" runner, but he's got such a big body that you put a 5'10" corner on him, they're going to really struggle to deal with him.
And they tried to get a couple this year, like Moise Nakar, we talked about before the show, is a little bigger guy. Vernon Allen, I think, is the other guy that we had talked about. And was escaping me early, and our bigger body guy they tried to get. I agree with you. Like, when I look at the grades for this, I really like Eugene Hilton Jr. That's a big time pickup for the Badgers. I think he can play early. I think he
was a Plan A target. They wanted him badly.
And there's some real offer lists here. Like Eugene Hilton Jr. had some Georgia interest. Like there's real schools that were after him. But I think you needed more, which is why I think this is like a C+ class in the whole.
I would agree with that. What I will say, going back, one thing for the class with this staff, there's a lot of Plan A guys that this staff hit on.
Good point.
That were their offers. You know, Davis was a Plan A. Carter Smith probably would have been a Plan A. Landon was actually a very early offer for them. So you're looking at it like looking across the board, they did a very good job of identifying who they wanted and closing the deal on those guys.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of the offensive linemen that we're going to get into are Plan A. Defense we're going to do later. A lot of those are Plan A guys. Let's get into the offensive linemen. All right, back with recruiting in 1 second. But first, a quick word from our friends of the show over at FanDuel. FanDuel, you know them. I know them. They're incredible. They're awesome. Right now, new customers, $5 bet gets you $150 in bonus bets if you win. You're not going to want to turn that away. What could you do with $150 in bonus bets? Well, you could put some futures on Wisconsin Badgers college basketball. With the way Greg Gard has built this wagon, why not? Do it responsibly, but FanDuel is the #1 source for all your parlays, teasers, spreads, futures, especially with the NFL coming up on the playoffs. NBA's full swing, college basketball's going on. It is a great time to get started over at FanDuel, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network, the official sportsbook of the National Football League. They are fast, easy, simple. And again, you get a great starter offer. That $5 bet gets you $150 in bonus bets. Terms do apply. Again, create an account. Create the account. Use over at FanDuel.com, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. The best place to get all your sports spiced up a little bit more over at FanDuel.com. All right, let's jump back into recruiting talk. It's NSD. Let's go. What are your thoughts? Let's start with Nolan Davenport. What are your thoughts on big Nolan Davenport as we pull up that film?
I absolutely love the offensive line class as a whole. I think that there's a lot of versatility in it. Davenport, Rivals is criminally underrating him, and it's been you've heard me complain about this now for going on like 3-4 months. He is a guy who I look at and I'm like, he's a 4-star. He just is. Like, you watch him, he's super physical, he's athletic, he's a guy who has a projectable frame, who I think is just going to be a high-level player at this level. And like, you watch him just bury people out there. And he played a really tough schedule this year. They played some of the best teams in the country at his school. And they were competitive with some of the best teams in the country at his school. So I have really high hopes for him, because he's not going to be a guy who's likely totally like completely caught off guard by how physical the college game is going to be, because he's used to playing high level talent.
Yeah, he actually reminds me a little bit of an offensive tackle that we lost, Garrett Sexton, in-state kid who ended up going to Penn State. I think he has those type of movement skills, though, like long, good frame. And you see him in space, Justin, like he's really quick on his feet.
For anyone who has ever talked to Ryan, Sexton is like the one that got away for Ryan.
It's like that one girl that never. You always
talked to her one night, she disappeared, and he never saw her again. And every once in a while, he sits and thinks, "Man, what could have been?"
Great white whale. Great white whale. The other thing with Davenport too, his testing numbers, that he does some agility numbers at some camps. His 3-cone stuff, agility stuff is off the charts for his size. I think he's severely underrated. I think this is one of the better offensive linemen in this class.
I would have probably had him at like a 91, 92 composite.
Yeah,
I think he's a legit easy 4-star.
Yeah, I agree. I love Davenport. All right, let's switch to the other tackle, Cam Clark, and then we'll get into the interior guys.
So what I will say, Cam Clark, his senior film has really improved. We were critical of him a little bit. You could see the physical tools on his junior film, but he lacked polish. Like he really had some work to do on his footwork, on his pad level, and I think he got a lot better as a senior. And it shows in his film. Like he's a much more productive player as a blocker this year.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, like I like seeing that you can see the progress with him. And now it's going to be, all right, now I need to get with a college coach that's really going to start to make the difference and turn the screws on making you become a player. But the physicality is there. He's a guy who's really that's strong, plays physically, and buries people. And when he buries them, he really buries them. I think that he's come a long way, and I'm glad to see it because he was the one guy that I was curious to see where we would be at after senior film. And I absolutely think that you could see the value there. Like he's a guy that was definitely a good piece of the class.
Yeah, and both these tackles, 6'6", 6'7", they're both big frame guys. I think the difference with me between Clark and Davenport just has better natural movement skills.
Yeah.
He feels more like the guy who's going to take on that best pass rusher, mirror in space, get out in space on a screen. To me, Clark is more built in a right tackle, traditional right tackle mold. That's not as true anymore, but he's more built in he's going to good leverage, fire off the ball, bury somebody. He's more of a 2 or 3 year down the road kind of guy. Yeah. Like get him in the weight room. You build it out, but there's a lot of tools here. A great frame, good size. I agree with you. The film improved. I love the way he just buries people. That's just an offensive lineman thing. I think both of these are pretty good tackles. I think, again, Davenport's a little bit more fluid, and I think Clark is maybe a little more natural run blocker, a little more tenacious potentially, but both good gets. Let's get into Big Mike Roski. What are your thoughts on Big Mike? I smile because he's like one of my favorite guys I've talked to.
He's effectively the mountain from Game of Thrones. Yeah. He's just massive. And you look at him and he looks like he's like 28 years old and has been playing in the NFL for 6 years. Because you don't normally see high school offensive linemen that are as cut up as he is as a guy who is in high school yet.
For people watching them, just go back and watch this first clip from Big Mike.
And he's over 300 pounds now, isn't he?
I think he's around 300, yeah. Again, not the highest level competition. He's going to play better people, but he just throws people out of the frame. Like I talked to some of the interior offensive linemen. Like I talked to Logan Powell, and he said, "Yeah, the film is just fun to watch. Yeah. This is one of those guys where it's just fun to watch." And Logan was like, "Yeah, Mike might be like the biggest dude I've ever seen." Yeah. He's just a man amongst men at this level, and he's got room. He's got a lot of stuff he's gonna have to work on.
He is playing at a high level, a smaller school. You always wonder the level of like not just competition, but also how much coaching they're actually getting. He's a guy I expect to really take off. You can see he gets very upright once he gets moving. That's gonna be something that's gonna get coached out of him. But he is a massive guy, and geez, he looks like he's taking out half the line on that play.
He's a lot of fun. I'll say this too. He had an injury that set him back a little bit. Prior to the injury, this was a player that was on the verge of blowing up. Notre Dame was starting to reach out. Michigan was starting to reach out. Like this was a player that nationally,
he's got really good leg drive when you're watching this.
A lot of you're talking about that traditional right tackle type, right? The guy who's just going to collapse the edge, bury a guy, create that gap, and just wear on a defense line. This is a guy in 2 or 3 years. If things go right and he really grinds and his staff develops him, this could be just a monster on the offensive line. I absolutely love. I love the mentality he has. Like he just likes to punish people on the football field.
Man, when he gets out in the open field, jeez.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, man.
I will say both these classes, last year's and this class, I feel like I don't know how you feel, but I feel like there's a fairly sizable upgrade in terms of athleticism in the linemen. Like you look at it, and it's not to belittle the guys that we have, but when I watch these guys move on the field, and most of them are not guys who are coming in light. We're talking guys, the bulk of these guys are all in the 270, 280 range. You're talking about putting 20 pounds on them. They move really, really well. And that's something that I feel like we've been missing a little bit, is you haven't necessarily seen that ability to move laterally or be able to really explode out of the block. I think there's more of that now coming through than what we've seen in a while.
Well, yeah, and we're going to grade this offensive line group when we get done with it. But I do think the strength of this recruiting over the last 2 years has been the offensive line between the two
They've
classes.
killed it both cycles. Just
I think they've absolutely killed
dominant
it.
offensive line classes.
All right, let's get into the next guy. Let's get into those interior guys we're really high on. Let's start with, let's see whose film I got up next. Let's start with, I apologize. Where is the film? Well, let's just start with Hardy Watts. While I'm making for good video, searching for film.
The one that Rajiv and I are arguing over which one of the, in the last two classes, who's the most likely to be an NFL guy?
Oh, what's the argument? Let me in on this.
Him and I were arguing over, I believe, is Emerson Mandel or Hardy Watts. I said Mandel has some elite movement skills for a guy his size, which is not shocking. You showed us the PFF grades earlier today, and he's near the top. He's at the top. It's like he's a guy who next year already, I feel like you put him at guard, he's going to be a plus player already at guard as a redshirt freshman. He's just that freakish athletic.
Yep. What do you see about Hardy Watts here?
I think he's very technically sound. I feel like he's a guy who's got some real physicality to him in the way he plays. He's gonna, like, I look at him, he reminds me of the more traditional Badger guards, like that we've seen, the guys that go to the NFL. I look at Mandel as a guy like Zeitler, who's just like, you look at the way he moves on the field and it's like, this isn't normal for a guy that's that size. I look at that Watts as more of like some of our internal guys that we've had that they're really good, technical and physical, and just bury people and maul people.
Yeah, Hardy Watts, 4-star kid. Both these guys, Logan Powell and Hardy Watts, both 4-star kids. I love the fire off the line of scrimmage. Like, he gets out quickly. Yeah. Really
very
quick.
Good first step. Yeah.
Footwork. That means his footwork's on point. That means he's been coached. That means he's comfortable in his body. One of the points he made earlier is all these players on the line are pretty physically developed. This is a player that's, you're not going to have to put a lot of weight on him. You already kind of know what he's going to look like. Obviously, he's going to get stronger, but I think this is a type of player who can play earlier than later. It's not a freshman thing, but maybe redshirt freshman, certainly redshirt sophomore type. Just because he's so technically sound, because he's nasty, because his footwork's pretty good. And this feels like the type of player as well that's going to be able to get out in space a little bit, lead a screen.
Is he the guy you think would be most likely to play out of this class next year if somebody was to play?
Out of this line, if somebody had to play?
Yes, out of this class. Because I think he is.
I think he's more likely than Logan Powell. Logan Powell would be my other guy that we're going to get to next. They're 1A, 1B for me on that. I think he's a little more technically sound. I think Logan Powell's a little more powerful.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, let's get in. Unless you have anything else on Hardy Watts, let's get into Logan Powell. And I didn't actually get film on Logan Powell. There was a huddle error there, but Logan Powell, another 4-star kid.
Yeah, we had that last.
I forgot about it. I was trying.
Are we sure he actually exists? Is Logan Powell a real human being, or is it just like he's a myth that's out there?
He better be.
Time to go looking for his video.
Yeah. No, and this is a player too. Really good offer list. Logan Powell, 4-star kid.
Alabama offer, a bunch of Southwest offers, obviously coming from that area of the country. Plays a good level of competition. To me, he's got he has a really high ceiling. I don't think he's quite as technically sound as Hardy Watts, but a little bigger, a little more powerful, moves really well. It's easy to anticipate the two of those guys both being contributors going forward at some point. Do you feel, because I think we would both agree, we had a long streak where we were pulling in 4-stars under the previous staff, and not a lot of them really ended up, becoming what we expected them to be. Do you think that these last two classes are a step up from that? Because personally, I kind of feel like they are. And it's not that those players physically didn't have gifts. I just feel like athletically speaking, the way that these guys move are a step up in pedigree from what we've had in the past. And a lot of it is lateral movement. A lot of it is just fluidity. Like, we have some guys that are really fluid in how they move as athletes in these last two classes that I look at, and I'm like, that's something that translates when you're trying to block a 260-pound defensive end that's got a lot of twitch.
I think so. I think some of those previously high regarded kids, you look at like a Rucci who had to put on a bunch of weight. A lot of the guys coming in don't necessarily need to do that. Logan Brown, who I don't think was the most mobile. Now, Logan Brown has kind of slowly turned it around now that he's transferred out, but I think the tackles and the players you're bringing in have more mobility to them than a Logan Brown did. Some of those interior guys, a Trey Wettig, it feels like we have better fits now. I think Wettig would have been a better fit at
They
right
fit
tackle.
the profile better.
Yeah.
They're a little smaller, a little bit more mobile, and a little bit more, I don't know how to explain it. Just a little more, mobile, I guess you would just say. They're a little bit more of fluid laterally and ability to pull than what we had with some of the other guys.
How would you grade this O-line room?
Oh, it's an A.
Yeah, same.
Like they killed it 2 cycles in a row. It's been an A both times. There's nobody that I look at and be like, you could have upgraded that guy. Like,
yeah.
The only guy that would have been Cam Miller, and I really liked his physical tools when we saw the offer and him commit. And I think that it's coming together for him. So it's like you look at it and you're like, okay, I can see the lane here to him being a productive player with us.
Last question on offensive side. Then we're going to shift into defense. Did they need to get a running back this cycle?
I think absolutely. I think you need to get one every cycle. I realized we got 3 last time, but with the transfer portal the way it is now, I don't think you can ever risk skipping a spot. And we saw this with the previous staff with both running back and with quarterback, where we would skip a cycle and you realize very quickly if something went wrong, how badly you missed that spot from a depth standpoint. You never want to give up an extra year. And I think that in this case, the one thing I will say with the transfer portal, running back is a position that is pretty easily addressable. Like you can get a body that's a solid body out of the portal, but I would rather have somebody homegrown that's been grinding it out in your program rather than trying to get somebody to fit.
Yeah, I think they missed the boat on it. I really do. I think once Byron Lewis, you realize you're not going to get that guy. You go find a player at a G4 level or someone with some tools. You flip them. I think you got to get a running back every year. You just have to. You get them in the pipeline. You develop them. I agree with you there. All right, that's going to wrap up the offensive side. We're going to get to defensive next on Locked On Badgers. Thank you for listening.